me a second and I'll kind of get the PowerPoint ready and everything. Okay. Okay. I hope everybody's doing very well today. I know I'm doing well. The weather is so nice, and I think it's going to be nice like this for the next couple weeks, so that makes me happy. But anyways, enough about the weather. I am Bree Full. I am a graduate assistant at the Service Learning Academy, and today I'm going to help moderate the panel discussion that we're doing today called Identifying Career Assets Through Service Learning. Our panelists today are Mary Philippi and Daryl Kucera. Not here yet. Hopefully they'll make it soon. They're from MS Forward. And then we'll have Laura Huntemer from Joslyn Art Museum and Latrina Hall from the Service Learning Academy. But first, I just want to give a little brief intro about the Service Learning Academy and what service learning is, and kind of this approach and framework that we personally take to service learning called asset-based learning and teaching and development. So let's just go ahead and get started. And if you have any questions, let me know. I'm just going to give a little brief intro, and then we'll get started with asking the panelists some questions. So, service learning is a method of teaching that combines classroom instruction with meaningful community-identified service. So in service learning, there's always going to be that component that connects a class to the community and is giving the opportunity to that class to take what they're learning inside their classroom and bring it outside the four walls of their class so they can actually learn how to you know, get out into the real world and, know those real world skills that are really important for students to develop. So the Service Learning Academy at the University of Nebraska of Omaha facilitates university and community-wide partnerships, develops and collaborates on community-based research, and supports rigorous service learning courses in pursuit of UNO's metropolitan mission to transform and improve the quality of life locally, nationally, and globally. So there are a couple of different types of service learning at UNO that we do. The first is called the traditional model, where we just work with another community organization and the university, which is going to be like a faculty member in their class. That's called the traditional model. And our P through 16 model is when we have a P through 12 class from the Omaha community, say at OPS or just another school in the community. And then we have the university component, which, like I said, is like a faculty member in a classroom at UNO. And then we have our community partner. And then another type of service learning that we do here at UNO is philanthropic giving. So in the field of service learning and community engagement, we partner students and faculty members with community partners to engage in service identified by the community partner that connects back to course curriculum, kind of how I was just talking about. These are some frameworks that shape how we approach this work. So individuals directly engaged in learning is kind of, well, let me rewind, sorry. Let me talk about asset-based community engagement. That's kind of what I touched on when I told you what we were going to talk about today. And it's the framework that SLA uses rather than kind of like a deficit-based framework. So we try to identify what the community already has and what we can kind of develop and grow on instead of, trying to see what that community doesn't have. We take this asset-based approach for many different reasons, such as it helps people to cultivate cultural effectiveness among university students, so they develop positive interactions with diverse communities, helps students work cooperatively together, helps to build reciprocal relationships, helps us be able to listen and learn from each other, and also it makes it so all participants are capable of making valuable contributions. That's kind of why we use that asset-based lens. So like I said, we use the asset-based lens rather than the deficit because it's important to understand the differences between the two. Historically, students from a lower socioeconomic background, students of color, first generation students, were discussed in the literature by focus on deficiencies or what lacked or the areas of failure. And that focus takes the light away from important critical attributes of a student that bolsters their confidence and motivates them to success as a student in spite of any obstacles they may face. So that's why knowing these assets is critical. So this is the asset-based approach defined. It places values on the strengths, assets, and knowledge students bring to them, to the university, and the view that diversity and students bring, including culture and language, disability, socioeconomic status, immigration status, and sexuality as characteristics that add value and strength to the classrooms and communities. Sorry, that was kind of a tongue twister at the end there. And also, it helps us to unlock students' potential by focusing on their talents. So there's also assets from students' lived experiences, kind of the things that they have experienced in their lifetime and all the knowledge, strengths, assets that they've accumulated over their lifetime. And this can include like soft skills, like being resilient, driven, motivated, resourceful. Also family and social support, cultural backgrounds, and identities. So these are some notes that were captured from the first gen student panel held last semester, and it provides some really great insight into assets the first generation students bring and what they want faculty and staff to know about their experiences at UNO. So they talked a lot about their family connections and how parents are not always aware and how they want to have a better understanding of what their child or student is doing in school. And sometimes the students have family responsibilities that require a lot of their time and energy and can be a barrier to, succeeding at school. So those are, the two big notes about family connections that they wanted UNO to know about. And more about the assets they bring, just more drive and ambition, because university is a higher priority to first generation students because of what it means to them. Drive and determination, because it can be very overwhelming. Excuse me, sorry. And they want to stay consistent because of the end result that can happen of getting a degree in your desired field. Oops, sorry. Also drive because of family pride and being a role model to family members, young and old. Breaking the chain of others not going to college and hopefully leading others in their family and friends circle, going to college as a result of them being able to do so too. And setting an example of something you want to stick with. Family responsibilities slash working takes precedence, but it's a constant reminder to focus on studies and do well. So that's all for the intro. I think I saw that Mary was able to join us, so that's good news. Hello, Mary. All right. And if all of the panelists are ready, I think I'm going to get started with asking some questions, unless anybody wants to ask a question initially about anything I just said about asset-based framework or SLA in general. Okay, I think I see Daryl there too with Mary. Hi, Daryl. Okay, so the first question is just share with us about yourself, your organization, your experience working with service learning, and a highlight of working with UNO students. And whoever wants to go first, just go for it.
jump in if that's okay. Hi, my name is Laura Huntemer. I'm the Director of School Programs and Interactive Media at Joslyn Art Museum. And a little bit about myself is I started off in the architecture field, and then after about 4 years working in the field, I volunteered at Joslyn literally 20 years ago or so about this time. And I realized that was the career I wanted. And so I went back to grad school, eventually got hired on full time. And so now I'm in my 14th year at the museum. And of that, we've had almost 10 years working with the Service Learning Academy on over 20 projects, both styles of the models. A little bit about the museum is we are celebrating our 90th anniversary this year. It was a gift to the city from our patron, Sarah Joslyn, in honor of her husband, George, to share their love of architecture, art, and music. And I hope all of you will get a chance to visit either virtually or in person. We are open. And one of the highlights, I think, of working with UNO students is just to see how much you care about your community. And that is demonstrated through how you really take ownership of these projects. And we know that you're balancing a lot of things going on in your life and not just school. And so the fact that you really take on these projects as something that is really serious and important to you, it shows how much you value your community and Joslyn specifically as a community partner. So thank you very much for that.
Okay, so I'll go first. Thank you for kicking the ball off. I think that's wonderful. So, can you guys hear me? Am I on mute?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, great. Okay, sorry about that, guys. So again, my name is Daryl Kuchera, and I own a gym here in Omaha called MS Forward and Fast Forward. It's actually two. For the past, we opened in August of 2001, and kind of the great blessing that has really come upon me anyway is a month after we opened the gym is when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So you have a choice of giving up or going forward, and we chose to go forward, and the blessings have been incredible. So for 20 years, we have a gym that we do athletic conditioning. In the evenings and during the mornings and the afternoons, we work with individuals with a chronic illness like MS, Parkinson's, dementia, spinal cord injury, amputees, sight impairment. So it has been absolutely a blessing. And we've been involved with UNO Service Learning the last 2 years. So we have probably learned more from you guys than you even learned from us. So thank you for this opportunity to chat. And then I will give the phone to Mary.
Hi, my name is Mary Philippi, and I really don't know what I should tell you about myself. I started out as an RN, got my master's in health administration, which I realized I didn't want to do. And then I started taking care of MS about 22 years ago. And I ran into a guy by the name of Daryl Kuchera at that time. And he kind of gave me a different way of looking at things. And you talk about service learning projects. I was Gerald's first service learning project. And I went on to get my PhD in neuroscience. And we've been doing research at the gym related to activity and our ability to get people to move. And this has been one of the most fascinating places I've ever had contact with. I have retired 2 years ago and continue to work for no pay, which I don't quite understand why I did, but what can we say? And I've worked with the service learning projects here at MS Forward. And it's fascinating to watch and learn from people coming in, because you get so used to seeing something that you don't see it anymore. And it opens your eyes to things you should be looking at and things you shouldn't be looking at.
Said well.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Latrina Hall, and I'm the P16 Initiative Coordinator in the Service Learning Academy. I've been in this role for a little over 3 years now, and I came to this work, service learning work, from a couple different spaces. I was a previous high school teacher. I taught English and journalism to ninth graders, and well, 9th through 12th graders. And then I went on to work at a nonprofit organization working with college students and preparing them for corporate internships. And then from there, I decided to, I wanted to work with college students full time in a university setting. So I went on to get my PhD in higher ed administration. So those 3 different paths kind of led me to this work, working with our fantastic community partners, working with P12 teachers, helping them to understand service learning and how it could really, strengthen their teaching and engage their students in a really innovative way. And also working with, with our faculty members and within the university space to really amplify how community engagement and service learning can support students' growth. So I feel like this is like a perfect place for me with all these different experiences, and it's been really amazing to work with UNO students. I don't always get to work directly with UNO students like in their service learning classes, but I consider myself blessed to work with our graduate assistants in our office. Those are the students that I get the most exposure to and have the most fantastic time working with. But I get to work with faculty on how they support their students. And as I think about assets and, how we kind of came, or how I'm a panelist right now, but I'm going to take off my panelist hat and put on my SLA hat real quick. And how we kind of came to this idea of, why do we want to talk about assets and kind of target students? And it's because in our work, we kind of like naturally came to this 3-pronged approach to how, assets and how they're so critical to understand and raise awareness among students. One, students, we want them to identify their own assets that they bring with them to the university. So those are the assets that Bree kind of talked about, like who they are. They already bring assets with them. They have these talents and treasures that are really important for them to identify that. But then 2, when they get into these service learning classes, they're building skills and assets through the work that they're doing and through the connections they're making to their curriculum and that community engagement and the work they're doing with the community partner. And then 3, we really want them to develop this asset-based lens that they apply whenever they're working in the community, meeting community folks, doing service learning work, so that they always look at every experience with that asset-based lens. They look for the treasures and the assets, the value that's already, and the strengths that the community holds. So that's why I think it's really critical that we talk about assets today, because UNO students are sitting on some treasures, their own assets. They're developing these assets in their projects, and they're also, they're really, they have a really great opportunity to learn about the assets in the community.
Yeah, that's all very valid. Thank you, everyone, for introducing yourself a little bit more. And also thank you, Latrina, for going in a little bit deeper about assets and why they're so very important to the work that we do. So the second question that I'm going to ask the panel today is, what skills do you see highlighted in a service learning project that students could use in their future careers? And again, whoever wants to go first, go for it.
This is Mary, and I think it's observational skills. Um, You know, you get to, when you go into a project, so to speak, when you go into a facility like ours or anywhere, you start learning to look around. You don't just learn from a book and take what that book says as gospel. You have to look at things, you have to be observant, you have to be able to see how one thing interacts with another to get the full picture of what's going on. So it's those observational skills initially, and that it's okay to look at something and to look at something a little bit different than like the person sitting next to you. Um, that's what makes a wonderfully functional person in society, is those observational skills and the ability to question, are we doing it just right? Or maybe we should move 3 steps to the left, 3 steps to the right, even if it is not widely accepted as a way of doing things. So it's observation and the ability to think outside of the box. How about that?
No, and that I'm gonna go next if that's okay, and build right off of what Mary said. Her point is worth $1 million. It's so funny. Last year, maybe Latrina, you might remember this. I can't remember if you were here at the gym, but we asked the service learning individuals from UNO last year. At our service learning project was a mentoring project with a group of 8th grade students from King Science Middle School. And it was so interesting. It was kind of a meet and greet day, the very first one we met. And throughout the question, you know, some of us were in power chairs, wheelchairs, and the question that was asked of everybody, and we wanted to have everybody be brutally honest, not what people think we want to hear. And this goes into Mary's point about observing and thinking outside the box. So just throughout the question, I said, what do you see? You guys are in your early 20s. You guys are 13, 14 years old, the students. What do you think of in an individual that's in a power chair? Throw out some words. And what words came out were lazy, unmotivated, poor,
Mentally
right, mentally challenged. It was it. And I love that. I love those because that's the feeling. And then as our project went going, that was in January, then went to February, March, April, May, and how that whole perception of individuals just changed, you know. And I can share, and Mary's heard this story a couple of times, so I apologize for that. But when my first experience was MS, I was working for, and I can say First Data Corporation at that time in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And we had a gentleman that was diagnosed with MS. I'm 30 years old, a little over 30. This other gentleman's in his 30s as well. And we traveled to a client, a bank that we were working with. We got in late, and the only way you could get from the airport to the rent-a-car place, because it was all under construction, was walking about a quarter mile. So the buses, you know, that take you to Avis or whatever it was, weren't working. And this gentleman goes, Daryl, I don't think I can make this quarter mile. And my mind is going, what? You can't, we're both 30 years old. You can't make a quarter mile walk. And those same things in my mind here, I thought I was being very, very kind to him and helping him. But in my mind, it's going, wait a minute, we're both 30 years old. You can't walk a quarter mile anymore. And then he told me about MS, never heard of it at that time. And boy, and then, 10 years later, I get diagnosed with MS. And today I couldn't make a quarter mile walk. But I think that's a great example of how the students from UNO just open their minds to, here's somebody that maybe can't do everything that he could. Maybe his value is lessened a little bit. But by the end of the project, I think everybody's eyes were wide open because, UNO, the MS Forward Gym, and the middle school students all really bonded together, learned from each other, and really thought very differently than they did 4 months previous to that. So I just wanted to build on what Mary said. I think it really, this whole partnership with businesses, partnership with with individuals and the diversity that comes with it really opened the eyes to a lot of students. And I think you're not going to get that, when you're in your classroom. You're not going to get that maybe in lectures, those kind of things. You have to experience it yourself. And I think that was one of the values to the last 2 years of service learning. So sorry, I took a lot of time there.
That's all. We love hearing your answer and learn about just how perceptions change with students who participate in these service learning classes. Sorry, go ahead, Laura. I interrupted you.
I was thinking that's a great example of how perceptions change. And I think I'd like to ask students what they think of an art museum before working on the project and what they think of it afterwards. The skill I have the 3 C's. I was going to share the creative thinking skills, communication skills, and collaboration skills. And so just expanding on maybe collaboration, it's really important to be able to collaborate with others on projects while you're in school, because you will be likely working on collaborations either within teams, within wherever you end up working afterwards in your career, or with other organizations. And so you have to, one of the things I think about is understand that everyone has different work ethics, perhaps, and understanding how to work with the different personalities, because again, that doesn't go away when you're done with school. And also thinking about not being a person who takes everything on in the project. I've experienced projects both ways, where I've been the one that's really taken a back seat because someone wanted to do everything on the project, and it's disappointing, but yet it happens. But I've also been the one who's wanted to take charge. And so understanding how to collaborate with each other, and understanding perhaps identifying roles, and not knowing, what skills you bring to the collaboration. Are you a cheerleader? Are you the one who's going to pull everything together and help identify that? And hopefully when you're in school, your professor will help you with that. But sometimes when you're in the real world, you're kind of told, here, you need to work together as a team and you figure it out. So collaboration skills to me are very important. And then when it comes to communication skills, you're going to see that on every job description. You have to have good communication skills. Well, what does that mean? And I think it's really being able to understand who you are and how to bring your voice to the position. And that's why with projects, service learning projects, especially for Jocelyn, when we're looking at things that we already potentially have, we want more voices, and especially student voices, to hear what you have to say about the artworks, because that's something we can't create. So, and then lastly, the creative thinking skills. We come for these projects to be able to work with you to brainstorm ideas, because more heads together make for a more beautiful project and more ideas to bounce off of each other. And we don't feel then so much pressure being in a vacuum to be creative all the time, when we can think of when we have a team of students working on a project together, and y'all come up with so many wonderful ideas that we just think, we couldn't have done it without you. So communication, collaboration, and creative skills.
And Laura, do you find, I'm in my 50s and we have the students who are in their 20s, and it's a completely different generation. So your points about communication skills, and it's just that this whole new generation, just the way they think, and what we grew up with versus what they grew up with is so important, because it's night and day in a lot of ways. So I'd love to listen to, the individuals at a Breeze age talk about, what's important to them that may not have been important to us, or vice versa kind of thing. Do you find that as well?
I think so, yeah. And I think understanding that when we might have non-traditional students in our classes, in the service learning classes too. And understanding, kind of coming to establish a way we're going to communicate.
Yes.
That we're going to do it, hopefully, if everyone's on board with the same way. Finding out I'm no longer hip and cool I'm in my 40s. So.
There you go. There you go.
You guys are just babies now. You know, I don't speak the same language, probably from about 3 generations now. I haven't spoken the same language. And I think that's part of this whole thing. We had mentors, people working in the gym that these kids come and work with and talk to, and they develop a whole different way of communication styles because of this. And it's just very, very interesting. Right now, we're working with UNL students coming in and building equipment. They're engineering students. And Daryl and I will both openly admit they speak a completely different language, not merely generational, but what do I want to say, area of interest. I sit there with my mouth open, a little drool running down my chin on a regular basis because they speak differently, and we have to learn how to communicate with each other to be able to accomplish what we want to do.
Gary, can I jump off something you said too? It's not just verbal communication. It might be the cues they're giving.
Correct.
Nonverbal communication, and it may not have to do with the actual words, I suppose. Something you said about the mentors working together, I bet they have an unspoken communication.
Completely.
Yeah.
And you know what has been interesting is with the 8th graders, they had to assume the role of their mentor. So if they had a right hand that didn't work, they had to come to the gym and their right hand wouldn't work. So they couldn't use it while they were here. If they were in a wheelchair, they had to get into a wheelchair and be in the wheelchair to be able to understand what that person's telling them and how they're telling them. And I will have to tell the story, and Daryl knows this one well. One young gal came in, and her mentor was in a wheelchair with a semi-functional right hand. And we told her before she could leave, she had to go to the bathroom and get herself from the wheelchair onto the stool without using her right hand or her legs. And you know, no big deal. She spent 10-15 minutes in the bathroom.
Easily.
She came out and her hair was standing on edge. She's kind of shaking, and she said, "That was awfully hard. I understand now what they're saying to me because I had to function in their world." And that's what the service learning is so neat, because you could just see it in everybody's eyes, what's going on and what they're thinking and how they're thinking. So it's fun as an old grandma to sit there and watch these kids when it kicks in. When it kicks into gear, it's phenomenal.
It really is. And that's something, you know, and Bree, you did a great job kicking this thing off, but you cannot get that from the best lecturer in the world or the best periodical or the best textbook in the world. Social media sites, you can't even get that until you experience what it's like to go without. And that's what Mary was just talking about. And I think that is one of the strengths of service learning. They get to experience exactly what they're reading about and learning about, but firsthand. And it's often very, very different between what they read and what they experience. So.
Right, exactly. Latrina, do you want to hop in here about what skills you see highlighted in service learning projects that students can use in their future careers?
Well, I think everyone has really gave examples for like networking skills. Like students really they learn how to network in different spaces that they may not have been in before or wouldn't have had access to had it not been for a service learning class. We have a lot of projects that are intergenerational. So students, you know, to Mary's point, they're learning to speak a whole new language, working with folks who are 30, 40 years older than them, And in new spaces, maybe these community partners are places that they've never been to before. So I think students are able to really hone those networking skills that are going to take them really far, and just being comfortable talking to diverse folks. But then another one I was going to throw out is just problem solving skills for, we know with the Service Learning Project, you come in with a plan and you might have to shift. So students are learning to be flexible and be really creative and solution focused, to really develop that, whatever that project is.
And to listen to other people. Because last year when we had the 8th graders and the UNO students, it was interesting to watch. They had to have projects together. They interacted. They had to have projects together. And it was kind of amazing to watch the college students when the 13 and 14-year-old kids came up with an idea, and they would look at them and say, I never thought of that. And I don't think they thought they were going to be learning from 13-year-olds. Am I right, Daryl?
Said well.
That is such a great point. That is such a great point.
Thank you so much for those thoughtful responses. I think networking is one of the greatest things that students can take out of service learning, and also just the initial exposure that students get when they experience going to an organization or, talking with someone who is of a different culture or a different mindset. Just the exposure that these students get is really important to moving forward in their future career and being able to be culturally sensitive, or have cultural humility is what I like to say. All right, next question. So what skills do students often use in your service learning projects that they may not often see as a relevant skill? And how can we help them identify that skill?
Communication, looking people in the eye, being one-on-one with somebody. Because what we have done, particularly in the last year with this, calling it a stupid COVID problem, is probably not right, but we've removed ourselves from each other so much that we've taught our kids to use their telephones, to use their computers, and they need to touch someone, if it's just sitting there looking them in the eye, or putting a hand on a leg or an arm and getting that personal interaction. We are losing that completely. And with the service learning, hopefully some of that will come back. We have to teach people how to interact with each other and communicate with each other and look them in the eye. Sorry, I jumped on that one.
Said very well. Said very well. Laura, do you want to go next, kiddo?
Sure. This isn't I like to think of the soft skills, the things you're not going to use in class, perhaps, or learn in class. And one of the things that is big for me right now is the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. Growth being that when you come into a job, showing or demonstrating that you have the ability to adapt and change. And COVID, this pandemic, has probably given us so many opportunities to use that skill or develop that skill per se, because for me, everything was flipped on its head. And so having to be able to think, how can we do what we were doing in the new parameters that we have to do it in? So really thinking about how you are available or able to continue to grow rather in a job, especially in being able to demonstrate that and then communicate that to the person that might be hiring. And then also time management. We always have timelines for the project, and I believe it was said, those timelines we need to be flexible. But because service learning projects are real and there's a real outcome and there's something that's real happening, you have to be able to manage time really well and be able to demonstrate that to future employers.
I think students don't often realize that they're using transferable skills, which really is a set of skills. So, they're just going about the project, not realizing that they're really displaying leadership. Or, to your point, Laura, time management, which is really critical. If just putting together that timeline and then determining, who's going to do what, and working backwards, or active listening. We have a project right now where students are interviewing community folks about their experience during the pandemic. It was going to be really critical that they listen and ask follow-up questions, which really need to be based on how well they listen, or just even researching. And so all of those are really critical, but sometimes I think they just come with the territory, and it doesn't always feel like, oh, this is a valuable skill. So, and that skill, these transferable skills, are easily transferable to other spaces, whether it's, graduate school, work, whatever it is.
Great point.
Sometimes,
You go right ahead.
I was just going to jump off of that. And sometimes, like Latrina was saying, you don't always recognize it. I have been helping friends with getting resumes together because of this. And I'll say, well, you need to put this as a skill. And they're like, do I really do that? And it's like, yes, you do it because you're doing X, Y, or Z, and that's what the skill is. And so sometimes, working together with someone to help identify each other's skills might help too, is because you don't always necessarily see what you're doing, and others may see it and help you put it into that skill word that you can then put on your resume.
Mm-hmm.
Great point out. I'll just finish by saying, everybody kind of talked about the pandemic a little bit, but, certainly expect the unexpected, right? Because pandemic was, that put everybody without very little warning, had to go to another option for just about everything. But pandemic is one. It's going to be all throughout your life. There's going to be economic situations that happen, personal situations that happen. But the real strong individuals don't let that stop them, right? They keep on going. A great example what we had last year, like Mary touched on. We had 9th grade students, we had college age students, and we had individuals in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And here come the pandemic, the shutdown. And we had to finish the project. UNO had to finish their project. The students had to finish their project, and we did as well. So after a couple of days, we had to say, okay, what are we going to do? We still know what our objective is. We know that we can't meet face to face anymore, but we still have to meet that objective. And I think that's where everybody really had to think outside the box. Couldn't really plan for it. I mean, nobody has a plan for this probably yet today in a lot of ways. But boy, everybody sure, did not let us stop them. We still met the objective probably better than we would have done if we were all still together here. So that expect the unexpected, because it's going to happen in life. Life just happens.
Well, I kind of believe that there should be a class at a university level called Bob and Sway. You have to learn how to bob and sway, or you're not going to be able to make it.
Yeah.
Now, we think we have to put a direction. You guys need to know what they're doing the minute they get out of high school, what they're going to accomplish, and what they're going to be in 20 years. That doesn't work that way. You have to bob and sway. Mm-hmm. And you could do probably a whole year's credit course on bob and sway.
I agree. That's why I think those transferable skills are so important, because you have to see how the skills could be useful in other spaces. Because I think probably the majority of us on here that have, a bachelor's degree may not be working in the field of that bachelor's degree. So like, how are you, knowing how you're marketable in other spaces and how your skills transfer. So critical. That's how you bob and tway, I think.
Mhm.
And just to jump off that point too, is don't feel that what you get your bachelor's degree on, that if that's not what you end up pursuing, you are not a failure. And that is one thing when I talk with interns or if I mentor anyone, it's okay to change your mind. No one told
Yes.
me that. So when I did change and shift gears in my career, it was my parents were not too thrilled. My science and math parents went, "You're going to go into the arts, nonprofit world," and they always encouraged me, of course, but it was something they didn't understand. But if you change your mind, you're going to be okay, and it happens. So that's
And in reality, they're telling us by research that every 7 years, you need to change direction in what you're doing. That's just the way it is. That's what's expected in this world. But we don't tell them that right out of the gate.
Right. Wow, that was some wonderful organic discussion that we were able to have. I had a couple other questions, but like I said, we just had an amazing discussion, so I don't think we're going to get to them. But I do have one more question, just wrapping up. I was wondering if you guys could just share in one sentence or word an asset that you have identified about yourself as a professional.
Okay, well, I'll start, and I'm gonna make a statement that was not mine, but there's probably nobody on this call, with the exception of Mary and I, that remember John Wooden. John Wooden was the 10-time national NCAA champion basketball coach at UCLA back in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. John Wooden made a statement that said, "To live a perfect day, you have to do something for someone who will never be able to repay you." I'll always remember that. I learned that many, many years ago. We're all going to grow up. We're all going to aspire to get a job that we love. We're going to aspire to make as much money as we love, and have all those things come together. But I think, and when I was working before we started the gym, that's what I was about titles. I was all about bonuses. I was all about salaries, and that was the driver. But really, until I really learned that statement that, yep, make as much money as you want, do what you love to do. Those are great. But boy, do something for somebody every single day. It can be something as small as opening a door for them, or like Mary said, putting a hand on their shoulder and say, "I understand," but do something for somebody every single day. And I think that's the one thing that I learned from this gym is, and anybody that works with a nonprofit feels that same way as well. You're doing it to help others. And that is one thing that I've really learned when you combine the self, but then combine the others as well with your career.
I'll move that one step further. I was talking to a researcher who is one of 10 in the nation in her specialty. And I made the comment to her, well, she had a PhD in biochem and microbiology. So she had a dual PhD. And I told her she was so smart. And she says, being smart has nothing to do with achievement, it's perseverance. So if you outlive everybody, you're more successful than everybody, I guess was her point. So in my mind, perseverance and direction are what make it.
Latrina, would you like to go or would you like me to?
You can go ahead, Laura.
Okay. So one of the things I've been thinking about, especially lately, is an asset is becoming more human-centered professional, human-centered manager, and which is divergent from where I started. We were kind of just expected to be machines to keep producing and pushing out. And it really takes having a really good supervisor, I think, to also, who is a human-centered manager, to be able to see, oh my gosh, we are all people, and just some internal studying that I've been doing, and realizing that it's if you put the faith and put the trust in your people that you work with, that's becoming more human-centered, and they are going to produce things. It's not treating them as machines. And that's kind of in my 20 years of experience since graduating with undergrad. I came, like I said, I came from that. You were just expected to produce, and every minute counted for something. And it's kind of hard to shift that way. So my hope for you as you're going into the world is that if you don't have a human-centered person that you can work with, that you yourself remember we're all humans, and we're all different, and we bring a lot of our assets to the team. And so focusing on the humanness of it all. So
Said well.
thank you.
I think one asset that I've identified about myself over the years is that I am a connector. And I think it kind of came just naturally, like I identified it naturally from the different roles I've held. But then I've also been kind of like Laura said, like I changed my mind when it came to my career, and I went down different paths, but I was able to find connections between them all that made sense. But I also just always find myself in spaces where it's important for me to be a connector, to connect people when I know, oh, they really should know this person, or they should know about this thing, or they should know about this opportunity. And it just makes me happy to connect. So that's a skill, that an asset I've identified, and I work on that because I think it brings value to what I'm doing and to others. You're on mute, Bree.
Sorry. Sorry. I was just saying thank you so much to our panelists for those really amazing responses. And we were going to have a little Q&A session if anybody had maybe a quick question. We have 4 minutes left. So does anybody have a question for our panelists? Okay. Well, Talia should have put in the chat more information about our upcoming sessions that we're going to have here soon. I believe they are on March 29th and April 12th. This whole series is a part of first generation programming for our students. And so this panel discussion was kind of the first part of it. And we're going to have 2 more events. So we really hope you can make it to those. Also, if you just have any questions for the panelists, if you could drop your email address maybe in the chat, if anybody has questions that maybe they want to ask you later that they just forgot to ask or didn't get the chance to, they can go ahead and just email you. And yeah, I would also like to talk about the whole prizes situation for attending these programming events that we have. So every time that a student comes to our event, your name will be entered in a raffle, and then at the end you will get an amazing UNO swag bag. So just a disclaimer, come to the events and you'll get cool stuff. But anyways,
invite your peers.
Yes.
So Bree, that's a great example of what we talked about. Us that grew up in the 70s and 80s, swag bag was something we never even thought about. So there's your generational thing, Bree. You just pulled it all together. Good job.
Well, and speaking from experience, Service Learning Academy has some amazing swag. So highly encourage doing it. I love my umbrella.
I heard maybe there's a coffee mug involved or something. I don't know.
Oh, it's those coffee mugs are amazing too.
Yeah. All right. So I think that wraps everything up today. And thank you everyone for coming and participating. I really love the discussion that we were able to have. So if you have any questions, follow up with the panelists, and have a great day.
Bree, thanks for what you do.
Thanks everyone.